And what is going to be interesting is what we're going to have on our screen, because it's something that I haven't seen in quite a while, actually. As you can see, it's going to be Muslim versus Vortix. Now, that, not an unfamiliar sight. These two are at the top of the leaderboards, really closely matched, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, at the time of recording, just checking the leaderboards now, I believe Vortix sunk slightly. No, yeah, he's 5th right now, and then the Muslim, I think, yeah, the Muslim plummeted. That was a hardcore hit, actually. He went from being like top 10, top 20, to going all the way down to 76, which is just nuts to think about. Also, this is a guy who just recently won one of the biggest tournaments we've had so far in Age of Empires 4, so it doesn't really just add credence to him as a player. I imagine there might be a Smurf in the mix. It's hard to imagine when he's got 670 games played, but the Muslim is hard on the grind. But that's not why I want to feature this. It's not because of the individual players who, in their own right, are enough reason to feature a game. It's the fact that I haven't seen an Abbasid on Abbasid matchup since, like, release. Not at the highest level anyway. It's always one person experimenting, the other one just going for your standardized meta, whether it's the Rus, whether it's going for the Mongols, whatever. We just don't seem to see this. And I thought it'd be intriguing, because the last time I did get to see an Abbasid on Abbasid matchup, it was a very different style being played, right? There was someone prioritizing military wing by the time they'd hit Feudal, which is unheard of by Abbasid players. Now, you never see it. And it could have just been someone getting used to the game and making suboptimal choices, or it could have been a specific choice for that matchup that makes sense. And we're going to have to find out where those deviations come in as we watch this. Also, hello, I'm on screen. This might be the first time you've seen me. I thought we'd try something new. Some people asked that I go kill cam and stick myself up on the monitor, so we'll see how this plays out. If people are a fan, be sure to let me know if you want me to keep doing this, or if you'd rather I just disappear into the background. Because I've noticed it's a mix, right? At first, I was like, because I come from watching the likes of Age of Empires 2 gameplay from the likes of, usually T90, I'd say, is my go-to, and obviously he never shows on screen at all. And then I noticed there's people like Mem, I believe Winter does it as well. Like, there's actually quite a few people who will happily just, I don't know, flaunt their face on camera. And I thought, what better opportunity to experiment with this than Age of Empires 4, where I can flaunt my flagrant anime hoodies and gaming hoodies at all times. Maybe eventually suit up. I usually do suit up when I work events. But anyway, and let's stop focusing on me. Let's focus on the game, because this game, like I said, should be intriguing. Eco Wing to open up, and look at the timing. Very tight matching between these two, so nobody slipping up so far. Breakdown of workers. You can see that actually the Muslim has more people on food, while Vortix is more heavily favoring the wood. This, to me, suggests that Vortix might be prepping for double archery range drop, whereas the Muslim could be thinking about booming into a second TC. It could also be that he's trying to set himself up for access to horsemen, anticipating that actually the opener for most Abbasid players on average right now, I would say, is indeed going into the archery ranges in Feudal. And remember, the way Abbasid works, they actually have a cool bounce back in later ages with the composite bows, right? If you get up into Imperial Age, you get access to that tech that allows you to have your archers fire 25% quicker. It's listed differently. It's they reload 25% faster, which is basically the same thing. I don't know why they need to be fancy like that, but mixture of word choicings, right? Because right now, the Abbasid sure as hell don't have anything else that's making them feel unique, so you might as well give them a word difference. We are going to see a shift towards the berries on one side, and a complete ignorance of it by the Muslim. The Muslim's still just on the sheep. Now, this is an interesting choice. It's one I've highlighted many times. I'm a bigger fan of taking the slight hit in gathering, and it's a very slight hit, by the way, in gathering rates by going berry bushes as opposed to sheep. The reason being is if you're a paranoid at all, your opponent might get aggressive. You should be getting the more risky food source first, which is going to be the berries. Because remember, the berries, you might go up against archers that strike at you from just outside of TC range. While if you get pushed back underneath your TC, you'll always have the sheep to just fall back upon. I think the reason we're not seeing it out of either of these players right now is this is an Abbasid matchup. You're not expecting high tempo aggression. You're not expecting knights running in your face immediately upon Feudal. So, now that we are in that Feudal, let's see how things switch up. Immediately dropping the stable. So Vortix, despite the start on wood, he's actually going to be the one going stable. And it's starting to look to me like the Muslim might be considering a few archers here. Look at the amount of people he's got on wood right now. It's up to 8 compared to now the 6. With Vortix, he just wanted that initial influx to be able to afford the infrastructure, and then is immediately just into stables, ready to have horsemen if need be. This could also be pro scouts, and it is going to be the pro scouts play. Now, this is an interesting one, because if anyone's listened to me enough, which I'm sorry, I don't know what to say if you've been forced to listen to me several videos over already. God save your soul and help your brain. But you seem to be learning something that's fantastic to see. Well, let me teach you an educational lesson here. You do not go for pro scouts as Abbasid dynasties, like ever. That's a very blunt statement, isn't it? But it's a very true statement, and here's the logic right behind it. You don't go for pro scouts as Abbasids because there's too many civs that do it better than you. The exception in this game, of course, is the fact that it's an Abbasid on Abbasid, and that's why Vortix is going very out of the comfort zone as an Abbasid player and choosing to go towards pro scouts, because he understands that when he's up against another Abbasid player, he's not outmatched, right? It's not the Rus, it's not the Mongols, it's not China, it's not these civs or like even HRE, right? Ones that have either a slightly stronger padding of surplus resources very early on to be able to afford the additional like infrastructure of 2 military buildings. That's the types like HRE and the French. But more importantly, the ones even above that, the ones that have earlier access to scouts or quicker production rates, such as the Mongols, Rus, and the Chinese. You don't have that as the Abbasids, which is why he feels comfortable to do this. And the cool thing is he's going to be uncontested, and we're already seeing 2 very differing approaches to how you play the Abbasids in the opener here, right? On the one side, Vortix, a very situational choice because it is that mirror matchup. While on the other side, the Muslim going for a more standardized approach as the Abbasids, which is into the secondary TC, which allows you to quickly utilize the fresh foodstuffs. Because remember, one of the things that makes the Abbasids quite unique and potentially powerful once they get tweaked, especially on the unique unit front, is that when you go for Eco Wing, upon upgrade, you get access to fresh foodstuffs. Fresh foodstuffs makes producing villagers 25 food instead of 50, so it's a 50% discount. That means that at the point in the game where a player could stand, like, on average, only afford to churn out regularly villagers from 1 TC and maybe a military building, the Abbasids are able to do it out of 2 TCs, allowing for that quicker TC boom. And that's where it has this micro eco-scaling, which doesn't maybe get highlighted as much because it's not as obvious, like, oh, you know, France saves 30% on researchers, or their villagers come out quicker, or China can increase the drop-off rate, or HRE later on gets their hands on, you know, infinite gold. It's a little bit more hidden of a fact, but it's going to come into play here. And also, look at this now, Vortix going to also be going to that second TC, understanding that his opponent is doing this, right? And you have to somewhat match it. You understand that you are up against another Abbasid player. He hasn't played for his carcasses at all, which means he's scaling on the villager count as opposed to just trying to go for that quality over quantity, right? Because remember, deers, you gather from them much quicker than any other food source on land except the boars. But the boars, you don't tend to play for at this point in the game. But what we are going to see is Vortix playing for some aggression. And look, he's going to have the counter matchup, right? Pushing out the horseman now. He's really delayed on this, though. So it's only 1 right now compared to the 3 archers. Remember, those archers push out quicker, 15 seconds compared to 22. And to Muslim, he feels the advantage. He pushes in to try and get himself a second archer range here. Needs to be somewhat careful. With 2 horsemen now out, the Muslim could end up losing these troops pretty quick. And it looks like that is going to be the case. I'm surprised by his choice to go for a second archer range, by the way. But this is the danger of forcing yourself in a situation where you're going to need a transition, especially when you play blind, right? Because you knew your opponent had scouts, so you should have anticipated to a certain extent that this could have been coming, and it means that you're now somewhat countered and probably need a Rax, right, to play into Spearmen to counter this. And that's what we're talking about with transitions, by the way. If anyone's wondering what transition is where, as it sounds like, you have someone, you have to switch to someone else. In this case, you have a military unit of X type, you have to switch to Y type. And the reason usually you have to switch to Y type is either in prep for a power spike time upcoming or to react to what your opponent is doing. Most of the time, at the absolute highest level, we will see like anticipatory plays where some players will just be fantastic at reading and they'll actually switch prematurely, not being forced, and it gives them the edge. Other times, more likely to occur because it's not as gambity. What it comes down to is the superior scout vision plays, right? The person who has more vision on the map and is keeping an eye on their opponents will be able to transition ahead of their opponent and then counter out what's coming, forcing their opponent into an uncomfortable transition off the back of a neutral trade, right? Neutral trade being in the center of the map. And if you win that trade, it puts you in a position where if your opponent doesn't have counterplay in position already, starting to be produced, that means infrastructure units coming out, etc., you can push in and actually pressure not only directly onto their base, but onto their economy lines, right? And that's where getting the advantage of horsemen being the answer is a fantastic one, right? Because it means that not only will you be able to raid your opponent's, like, archer line in this situation, you'll be able to push through onto the villager lines. And there's a lot of villagers here, right? Remember, they both went for the double TC, which means that it's 39 and 47 respectively. And that's why Vortix needs to strike in here. Pushes in, nice stabs, gets one. Probably will get 2 villagers here, actually. Has to back away. He's a little bit paranoid with the TC. He needs to kill a few more here, right? We can still see an advantage of 7 for the Muslim, because remember that Vortix was later to go up into that second TC. But he is now going to accompany his horsemen with some archers. Meanwhile, for the Muslim, it's... Oh my god, he's doubling down. Wow, 4 archery rangers now. So he's just scaling up into the We Go Pew army, right? And in theory, this can work with enough archers. Remember that the horsemen, they have a little bit of range resistance, a lot of health, and they do get additional damage if they get in poking range of these archers. But you can see, like, if you're not managing it correctly, if you're pulled away, you're going to take a lot of damage on the entry. And I think the more important detail that a lot of people kind of forget about here is these formations. I don't think Vortix is going to forget about this, and I hope he doesn't. But I've seen plenty of players lose against armies that they basically counter with horsemen, right? Where, for example, they have horsemen, their opponents have horse archers or archers, and they actually end up losing those fights simply because they don't use the formation choices. The reason you want to use line formation, by the way, is when you have enough horsemen, it will force them all to engage with different range targets. It sounds suboptimal, but the whole concept is the alternative is when you attack click in, they all prioritize the target right in front of them, as in at the front of the formation, and what usually happens is you see this collapse towards the center where they end up attacking the same target. And it means your initial impact is very underwhelming. But I don't even think we're going to get to that stage at this rate. I mean, just look at it like this, right? There's barely any horsemen. A few harassing at the back, so nice going by Vortix there. But Vortix has switched completely into the archer army now. And battle rounds being built. The Muslim, he smells weakness and he looks to strike. Horseman around the back will finally be felled, but the Muslim with a 10 villager lead. And on top of it, forcing his opponent to keep moving these villagers around in prep to try and actually get rid of the battering ram. Battering ram is going to waste a little bit of time trying to get through the outpost first, and we see racks now being dropped. But remember, this is Feudal Age. The only thing you have access to here is spears. Spears are going to be counted out by the archers. So right now, the Muslim, like we said, not only going to force his opponent to transition, but the transition is uncomfortable because it will not counter what is up against you, right? And that's the worry I have. Is Stables, I like the opening. He needed a double down. He needed 2-3 horsemen being pushed out every 30 seconds, and that's just not the case. It means he never hit that critical mass, and now he's in trouble. And you can see he's dropping the racks. The tech up is getting close to complete. 35 seconds. Remember, one of the most frustrating things about playing the Abbasids is you have no way of increasing the speed of these tech ups. They are locked in. 2 minutes apiece, and you have to wait that whole time. And I believe the tech up should... No, it's not even underway. So the Muslim, he's all in on this. He understands that he can win the game right now. And the Baron Rams are making their way through. Remember, the importance of taking out all these buildings, it damages the Golden Age, right? It pulls your opponent away from getting those superior gathering rates as well as research speeds, etc. He's about to hit it. He's only got 2 racks down. And there's a lot of archers here right now. 3 Baron Rams as well. The Muslim. Not pressuring too hard. Remember, the thing with the primary TC now is that it can actually choose its targets. So if you get in range with these archers, he will turn around and start attacking you with the 14 garrison villages inside the town center. Castle is now reached. The Muslim, he's on the clock. He needs to find a way to close this out. Now onto the House of Wisdom. Remember, if you take out this and the primary TC, that is a landmark GG out because of the way the Abbasids do function. It takes so long. 12,000 HP on this House of Wisdom. And these Baron Rams, remember, less health than they had at release after the nerfs and a 200 damage still with a 5-second gap between each attack. And now with the man-at-arms coming out, the Muslim going to be forced away. Going to lose this 900 wood investment. But in fairness to it, it got some value, right? It put some pressure on. It forced more economy to not be being utilized by Vortix. And it did delete several buildings here. Let's say 50, 50, 50. So I'm going to say maybe 400 wood or so damage. It did cost him 900 wood, but consider how long the villagers weren't collecting for Vortix. Now look, power of the man-at-arms. 6 range resistance. And remember, these archers, they only do 6 damage. Which means they're hitting for 1 damage. We're not that mean. We don't put it down to 0 in Age of Empires 4, but we will put it down to 1. which means with 33 archers, every volley of all of those troops onto one man-at-arms isn't even taking a third of their health. It's pretty absurd, I know. And now look, tech up only just begun for Muslim. He was so greedy going in so powerfully, right? He didn't want to delay himself at all. He must have understood that he was behind on the tech up because his opponent's army was so small. So he's on the clock, and now as a result, forced back to his base, he's got a long time to wait. Minute of 26 seconds until he will be up in the castle age himself. Vortix, in the meantime, going to start losing some of these archers, but remember, they are vet archers, right? So in a one-on-one trade, they'll win out, and more importantly, these man-at-arms still funneling in and still causing some anarchy for the Muslim. But remember the weakness. They do move incredibly slow, as we're seeing here. Kind of just being ignored. And oh my god, the death cries right now. I don't remember ever making this many death cries in the past. Maybe I'm wrong, though. I'm pretty sure this is an Abbasid-specific thing. I never remember other archers making this much noise when they die. It's like they're not only dying, it's like they're being pushed off a cliff and you can hear them screaming on the way down. Good lord. Oh, but here we go. Vortix, remember, this is the thing he has advantage over. The Muslim, still waiting on that castle age tech up, doesn't have mangonels yet. This could end up losing him the game if he's not careful. How many man-at-arms? Up to 8 now. He needs to get through these racks. Oh, the mangonel shot! It's good! It hits hard! And it looked like it was going to be off target, but he strikes to the back of the formation. 8 dead in the blink of an eye. And all of a sudden, the villager count more or less even here. And now begin to siege. He needs to get through the racks quickly. He understands what his opponent is doing. With this many racks down, he wants to hit Castle Age and Zerg out the man-at-arms. And that is why his own man-at-arms and mangonels need to start boning these down quick. Because remember, he's outnumbered. Not only does he only have 2 racks over here, but he has to run all the way across to the base to reach. That's going to be 1 down. Switches around for the other one. I reckon he gets through 2 of these racks before the man-at-arms start coming out. And I love this play. Get the battering ram out, right? He needs to build up that initial quantity of man-at-arms. You have 2 mangonels in location, you should feel confident. But look at this play now. The Muslim, up to 3 mangonels, built in the back, courtesy of the archers. Remember, this is one cool thing you can do as the Abbasids. You have the ability to build out in the field with these siege weapons. Pulling back the man-at-arms as best he can. Scouts even joining in. Remember, 16 damage per burn. Every little helps. Nice dodge out from the mangonel shots incoming. The battering rams should be left to do their duties. Scouts trying to chase in, but the archers are going to put an end to that quickly. The mangonels doing just enough damage to ensure that they wouldn't even get in for a single strike. But now the mangonels to play. Into Muslim, he goes to the split formation. Man-at-arms trying to chase in, split up. Doesn't want to cluster his troops right now. Vortix, once again on the ropes in this situation. He's still outnumbered, and now crossbows coming out for the Muslim. Remember, that's something that he hasn't got access to. Vortix, he hasn't brought out the crossbowmen at all. They're trying to come out now, but it might be a little bit too late. He delayed this, and as a result, it's not looking too good at the moment. I say that, the mangonels are being cleaned up though, and that's the difference maker. Look at this, because the Spirals got built by Vortix, and nothing similar out of Muslim. Muslim is going to lose the army. Vortix, outnumbering his opponent by a decent few troops here, and definitely has the quality as he pushes through. Barely any archers remaining. Crossbowmen trying to come out. The man-at-arms barely able to reinforce with only 2 racks here. And here comes the villager push. It's the only option he's got. The Muslim sacrificing his economy to get rid of his opponent's military. A short-term advantage, but not with that many villagers being spent. The mangonel still running away. And the archers just picking away at the villager lines in the meantime. The Muslim not able to strike with the value he's looking for here. And it looks like Vortix might be close to closing this one out. How many villagers now? 77 to 65. And he still has a mangonel, a springald. And nothing for Muslim. Muslim trying to build up something again now, right? Getting the mangonel out. But you've got to feel like he's close to out. He needs to strike in. He needs to find some value. He needs to find a breach on the Vortix's economy lines, or this game is going to feel over, right? Because look at Vortix. He's building surplus this whole time. Resources are there. He's got plenty to play with. At the same time, he's going to have tech advantages left, right, and center, considering he arrived in castle before his opponent. I mean, you see it on the tech ups here, right? When we look across at the Muslim in his blacksmith, by comparison, no bloomery. No level work. I'll remind you, those are the tier 1 researchers for melee, and he's only now getting through one of the tier 2 ones for ranged. So right now, he's just outmatched, not only in a quantity perspective, but also a quality perspective, which is why the Muslim needs to find some value. Remember, when you push across like this, the other side, and you're funneling out man-at-arms, crossbowmen, these are incredibly slow units, so the reinforcement rate is going to be very sluggish. Maganel. Spirals move in to try and snipe it out. And they're going to get their shots out. Free is good enough to wipe it instantly. The Maganel Avage now with Vortix, the Muslim. I think he might just be done. I gotta admit, that Maganel, that was his hope, that was his prayer. And now that it's gone and his forces are being wiped, he will call the GG. What a play coming out of Vortix, though. I love the way that he opened this up, right? With the stables play, understanding that in most cases you can't actually leverage the amazing boom power of deer carcasses to surpass your opponents, right? When it's anyone that has a superior rate of actually getting scouts out and getting access to those carcasses. But in an Abbasid on Abbasid matchup, that's not the case. So he takes that edge and makes sure that although there's an economy lead at 1 point for the Muslim, it's the fact that he's getting more efficient food gathering. Also, keep in mind that when he has the Horseman ability, he's able to actually start pushing a few of those out, harassing the eco lines. That came into picture 2-3 times. And I love the idea by the Muslim to try and shut him out of the game very early on, pushing him with a Feudal, but it felt like it came a little bit too late. Maybe if you strike a little bit sooner, you wipe out your opponent's forces a little bit quicker, you're in a situation where you can actually batter ram through the secondary TC at least. And that changes the game entirely. Vortix won't be able to scale his economy as quickly. It means that he doesn't manage to actually pop up to a point where he's able to push units out constantly of that many military buildings. And that, I think, was the difference. We saw the Muslim has so many buildings down, has so much surplus and so much ability to push out. But because his opponent is able to support that type of economy that he was pushing forward, Vortix reaches the critical mass a little bit quicker, and that gives him the edge just to overwhelm when he pushes into that base, right? Imagine if he comes there with, say, 1 less Maganel, 1 or 2 less Springles, which is feasible if you consider the second TC's gone. But no, Vortix, great read on the situation. Nice, very niche style of opening. I don't think you will see that regularly out of Abbasid players, but identifies perfectly that sometimes you have to go outside the box, right? When you're talking about X versus X matchup, when you're talking mirror matchups especially, you can either try and play the exact same game and gamble on what's coming out in the mid game, or you can try for a gambit strategy where essentially, given the conditions of the match, you could very easily have the biggest of advantages, but even if you don't get that, you're probably looking at even grounds going into that mid game. So fantastic out of him. But that's, you know, that is just a beautiful showing out of Abbasid on Abbasid. No military wings, sadly. Both eco wings, just showing you the power of fresh foodstuffs. But man, I'm excited to see if we can find more. I'm excited to see if these people start to interact with Abbasids more, because I think Abbasids has been a very heavily underutilized civ. I think it definitely is due for some buffs, and hopefully you see that coming out of it. There's a lot of limiting factors that can make it feel a little bit weak at the moment. Especially, I think the most obvious one to people is how underwhelming their unique units are. So, kind of fingers crossed to see what's going to happen in the New Year's. But in the meantime, this is what we're stuck with. Amazing little play out of Vortix, giving them the win.